All right, everyone, just as a quick aside, it'd probably get a Manafort verdict today. The longer it goes on, after a certain point, the more likely it is that the Mueller probe falls apart because he gets found not guilty on everything. Because I would think reasonable doubt, after days of deliberating these charges, wouldn't you think that at some point it equates to reasonable doubt? You're like, well, I don't know if he's guilty or not. I'd think you'd find him not guilty. Now, we got to talk about Asia Argento. She's one of the progenitors of the Me Too movement. And apparently what happened is that years ago, 2013, she sexually assaulted a 17-year-old child star. It wasn't even like a consensual interaction. She assaulted him. And then he's got, I think, Anthony Bourdain's lawyer, which is itself very, very strange, retained explaining this whole thing. And he got paid over $380,000. Now, after getting assaulted in this manner, I would think that would, sweeten the deal. Someone's like, yeah, I got PTSD and I'm all fucked up because, this hideous, person is trying to, rape me, basically. But, at least I can get a sports car and some cocaine, which is what happens in Hollywood. This happens all too often within these moralist movements. And Rose McGowan, she comes out, she's like, well, we might not know all the details, be gentle, basically wait and see. And meanwhile, this is the same person who's like, you must instantly believe the victim and whoever supposedly victimized them, with or without any form of evidence whatsoever, must immediately be deplatformed, crucified, and destroyed. This is basically the early Me Too movement now, because it comes home to roost, because it turns out one of its main proponents, one of the early and often people involved with it, is herself a sexual predator. It turns out, be gentle with her. We don't necessarily know all the details. Now, maybe it wasn't really assault. It was kind of consensual. She's Italian. Oh, the age of consent there's like, what? Probably lower than here. It tends to be the case in Europe. I think in Spain it's like creepy. It's like 13 or some stupid shit. It gets to the point where it's a little bit odd. But, this is just another example of this same hypocrisy. Like with the former video with, like, White Guild and New York Times and stuff. So often, people who engage in this kind of moralism have something to hide. Like, when I look at people who are, like, the pro-censorship, they're like, oh, there's a private companies, they can do exactly what they want. It's like, well, what are you really saying here? Doesn't make any sense. You're not a billionaire CEO, so why would you pretend to have such skin in the game? There might be a little bit of projection involved there. I think it's because they themselves, they're hoping to be perceived of as a good little jackboot licker because they themselves have guilt. Like they've shitposted on anonymous accounts and stuff like that, and most of them have. And so they're seeking to project this facade, this veneer, as though they were a polite, normal citizen, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean. And so they're like, well, it's perfectly fine. I'm glad Silicon Valley is cleaning up the swill and trash. Well, yeah, that's because you're swill and trash. But you don't want to be noticed for having been swill and trash. I bet if you could actually dig into these people's records online, if you could actually unmask all their anonymous or like sock account posts, I bet you'd find that they had the filthiest mouths, said the stupidest shit, that they were the ones that were bullying and shitposting the most, and that they're piles of trash, basically. I think you would find that about most of these jackboot-licking thug morons, which is really what they are. They're like, hey, Stalinism's okay with me as long as it's a private company doing it. With Me Too, you have a difficulty here. Here's the difficulty. You have the progenitor movement, which is absolutely acceptable and makes sense. You've got a lot of people, they're moneyed, powerful individuals within Hollywood. Some of these people have literally billions of dollars. Like a Weinstein, isn't he worth like $2-3 billion fucking dollars? They habitually harass people, and he comes out and he's like, yeah, of course people trade sex for like movie roles and shit. It happens all the time. Are you fucking surprised? It's like oddly enough, Weinstein is... terrible as it may sound, he's the one that's being the most honest about how Hollywood really works. Yeah, it's filled with filth. Yeah, I fuck people for, I give them money to get in their pants all the time. Yeah, what do you think a casting couch is really about? What do you think you're doing on that fucking couch? That's basically what he's saying. Absolutely true. It was sort of an unspoken secret. It goes even back into like the early tinsel, 60s or something. You have this like glamour and glitz and all the pin-ups and stuff. It's like, what do you think they were doing? What do you think Marilyn Monroe did to get her career? She humped everything that moved. She fucked the president of the United States and his brother, possibly at the same fucking time, along with every other magnate and rich person that ever wanted to get in her pants because she was a pleaser. And then we have this weird, like, squeaky clean image of her as solely being, like, victimized when the CIA came and assassinated her, which they almost certainly did. No, Hollywood is full of stuff like that. It's not all a case either, by the way. We have this false dichotomous way of thinking. We think in terms of predator and victim of predator. What if it's possible for someone to be both? Here you have a perfect example. You have someone who apparently was treated in an improper manner, who was sexually assaulted or whatever the allegation was by Harvey Weinstein. Probably true. I have no doubt that he does stuff like this. I have no doubt in my mind. I'll say, for legal purposes, we got to say it's alleged because he hasn't gone to prison for it yet. Okay, the allegation is probably, in my opinion, true. This other allegation that she herself was also predatory towards another individual, yeah, that can be simultaneously true. What, it's not possible? It's sort of like, imagine if someone was like a serial rapist and then they go to the bar and they get knocked out and they get raped or something. Like that situation could happen. There was a situation, who was it? God, I can't even remember which people were involved. Was it Ramirez and Bundy or some of there was a case years ago where it's possible that two serial killers that were mainly preying on men, I think it was Gacy and I can't remember. Two of these infamous serial killers, somebody who knows more about serial killers can fill me in, may have met in a bar, I think in Los Angeles, is on a gay bar, and dated and maybe even fomented to literally kill one another. And so it gets to the point where it's well, that would have been an interesting situation. Yes, you can have a situation where someone is victimized, but they're not always situationally the victim. It's like someone gets taken for a ride in court, but then they file a frivolous lawsuit or something. It's possible for that to happen. Somebody gets attacked, but then they end up later in life, they attack somebody else. Like someone gets assaulted. Does that perpetually mean that they're just the submissive, battered individual? No, they could do the same thing to somebody else. And of course, that's the allegation here. In this case, you have a settlement. And to have Anthony Bourdain's former lawyer apparently involved is very odd, because didn't Bourdain he dies under weird circumstances during the Me Too stuff anyway. And so right after criticizing the Clintons and Weinstein, it's like he weighed in on all this stuff. He's like, yeah, there's a lot of filthy fuckers in Hollywood, and a lot of these people are degenerated and weird. By the way, the Clintons are terrible people. Bill Clinton is a sexual predator. And then all of a sudden he kills himself within a week. Very strange. And then his lawyer's working with this. I don't know, is he a specialty lawyer that specializes in sex assault or abuse cases and stuff? It's possible. I don't know the full details on that side of it, because it's just weird to me. But no, it's perfectly fine to speculate that sometimes somebody who themselves has been legitimately victimized, you have to feel sorry for them in that scenario, could then have done the same thing to others. The fact that this wasn't a consensual encounter exacerbates it considerably. And then pays him almost $400,000. It's like, hey, yeah, so it's like, hey, happy 18th birthday. Sorry about that time I tried to finger your ass. Here's $380,000. Does that make it better? Yeah, and by the way, here's a Monte Carlo, and it's just stupid. But yeah, it shows a little bit of the hypocrisy. You could almost envision a scenario in which she's like, well, I wouldn't have come forward, but I'm worried that this story will get out. I'm going to preempt it by inserting myself in as a perpetual victim. It's possible that people can do that too. It's a protection mechanism. It's like male feminists, like people with white guilt, like some people who are, they're like the whitest supremacist, and all they do all day is talk about race. It makes me suspicious, honestly, of what they actually believe. Or you get like a Louis Farrakhan or something. It's like an Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton rambles about racism all day. He doesn't ultimately give a fuck about the issue. He probably has racial views too. He just uses that to make money, and because he's a political opportunist. He's a hack. Jesse Jackson's done the same. I think about David Duke and some of these other people. Their obsession over some of these issues is a little strange. The Ted Haggarts of the world. The Bob Larsons. I've got tales from the inside that I won't talk about regarding Bob Larson that are hilarious. And framed in the context of the Satanic Panic, just fucking absolutely hilarious to think about, because he's doing his pretend exorcisms and stuff like that, and talking about how heavy metal is of the devil, and writing books on the subject of Satanism that he clearly knows nothing about. And yet then I'm hearing from people who are in the know about it that something entirely different might have been the case. Again, just allegations, just an anecdote I happen to be privy to. Give me 20, 30 years, then I'll discuss it maybe. It involves people that are still alive, including him. He's a funny dude. Don't want to fuck with his career or something. I don't even know if he does that stuff anymore. I know he's got a website, I think. I don't even know, come to think of it, I don't even know if he's still alive. He could have keeled over already, so gotta check in on that stuff. Now, when you get these moral panics, the original concept of Me Too makes sense. It's like, hey, I've been assaulted. I'm coming clean about the fact I've been raped. I've been sexually abused in some way. I'm telling the world about it so I can share my struggles in hopes that others will come forward and tell theirs and not wait for years and years so that justice is escaped by the people doing the abuse. The problem is that then we get to the point where we start crucifying people on mere allegation, even if in some cases the story is blatantly false. And we get to the point where some people, they're held up on a pedestal inappropriately because they themselves have, in other situations, been the abuser. If the Me Too movement wants to exist and be helpful, it can't shelter people who are part of those groups. It absolutely has no choice but to crucify its own members, which is sort of how these things fall apart. Nobody's going to want to use the hashtag and fill in there like now Rose McGowan comes out and just go, be gentle. It's like, no, bullshit. You said exactly the opposite when this thing first began with regards to Weinstein. It's like, well, believe the victim. Now it's like, well, maybe there's exceptions. Maybe we gotta wait till all the facts are in. Be gentle. Yeah, no, that's not the way that you've been doing business, so don't expect others to extend the courtesy to you. Moral panics often fall apart because the draconian, increasingly tyrannical behavior of the moral panic may then be aimed inwards towards the moral panic, and it just shreds it right apart. That's what happened to the satanic panic. It happened because of a bunch of evangelical ministers that it turned out were actually the kitty diddlers. They were actually the drug users, and they were actually like totally inauthentic money-grubbing hacks. Well, yeah, not necessarily the greatest leaders of a social movement that up until that time had been considered credible. It fell apart within a few months. That's about all. Peace out.